Alrighty, you are live. I love that it tells me. It's so wonderful.
Just to make really sure you know what's going on.
Exactly. And I use, here's the banter bit where we wait for people to like click on the link that we sent them.
File in. I get it.
Yeah, it's the patter at the beginning. But yes, hello everyone.
Find their seats?
Yes. Get the concessions from your kitchen. But hello everyone. I'm Rebecca Spees from One More Page Books, and tonight we are chatting with Cass Morris, who is the writer of, I have the books here, of the, oh no, I should have checked the pronunciation. Is it Avon?
I say Avon, but I appear to be the only one, and frankly, once it's your book, you can pronounce things however you want to, so...
Fair, because a lot of the Latin names, I was like remembering my high school Latin, and then I was like, no, but there's church Latin. There's so many things.
Hey, and I fudge it half the time anyway, so.
Anyway, we are talking with Cass Morris, the author of the Avon cycle. From Unseen Fire is book 1, and then the new book 2, that we are launching tonight is Give Way Tonight, which that cover... Oh my goodness, these covers are amazing. I love them so much. Actually, I'm going to do this. There. Oh, no, it fell down. There we go.
I think mine are in frame. It's always sort of hard to tell if the audience is seeing what I'm seeing. But
yeah.
I think my children are in the shot with me.
Exactly. So yes, we are so excited to have you here with us tonight, Cass. And for those of you watching at home, hello. Here's how tonight's going to work. I'm going to go through all of my questions that I have for Cass, and hopefully they're exciting and fun to listen to. But if any of you have any questions that you'd like to ask about the books, for Cass, about writing, anything you'd like, stick them in the comment box below or to the side, depending on where you're watching this. And we will see them, and I will integrate them into the conversation. So at any point during the event, feel free to drop a question in there. So a little bit more about Cass, and then we'll jump into the questions. Cass Morris works as a writer and an educator in Central Virginia, and occasionally moonlights as a bookseller in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which is amazing. I'm from North Carolina originally, so you're one of us. And she earned her undergraduate degree from the College of William and Mary and completed her Master of Letters from Mary Baldwin University. She also worked as the academic resources manager at the American Shakespeare Center in Stanton, Virginia, which is how I met Cass first, sort of coming through a bunch of different communities. And she has presented at a ton of academic conferences. All of the list is on her website. They're super cool. Check them out. And she reads voraciously, wears corsets voluntarily, and will beat you at Mario Kart, which is an excellent bio. Who is your Mario Kart character, first of all?
Well, it depends on which version. In the current one on Switch, I like Pink Gold Peach, but I used to also really like Rosalina, especially on the Wii, and Daisy back in some of the old school.
Yes. I was a Daisy Peach girl myself. But yes, hello, I'm so excited. So why don't we start out, Cass, with just your sort of quick overview, elevator pitch for the Avon cycle?
Absolutely. The one-line pitch I use is, I gave the ancient Romans magic to see what they would do with it. And it was wonderful and terrible things, as you might expect from the Romans. That's sort of where my whole concept with it began. The Avon cycle follows a wide variety of characters, but focuses mostly on Latona, who is a mage of spirit and fire, and she's a patrician woman who feels very hemmed in by the circumstances of her life and is deciding she wants to do more. She wants to be more. She wants to use her magical powers more. And the other protag is Sempronius Terran, who is an ambitious senator with a dark secret. He is also a mage, but mages aren't supposed to scale the political ladder in their society, so he has kept that a secret his whole life. And that's going to eventually cause trouble for him. He has to try to keep that hidden as he is trying to enact his goals for Oven, for their society. And he is a very progressive thinker, which gets him into a lot of trouble with other senators. And that's where the whole political aspect of the story comes in. And it tangles up with the magic. And I love it. I love getting to dig deep into all of that good, juicy stuff.
Yes, it is delightful. Like when I read the first one, I was reading it and I didn't have pearls to clutch, but if I could have had them, they would have been clutched. And I love all of the Roman sort of aspects to it. The one-line pitch that you gave, it's like you gave the ancient Romans magic to see what they would do with them, I think sums it up so well. And I was wondering, what was it about ancient Rome that first grabbed you, and like what made that the place that you wanted to set this story?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've known I wanted to be a novelist since I was 11 years old. But it wasn't until a couple years after grad school that I realized I sort of, I hadn't been writing fiction in a very long time. It's like, if you want to be a novelist, you probably should do that. And I was thinking about what sort of world would interest me. And I wanted to do something that wasn't the stereotypical Western medieval Europe fantasy. Which there are still new and exciting things being done in that realm, but I sort of wanted to do something slightly different. And I was thinking about, okay, what do I know about? I knew a lot about ancient Rome. I took Latin in high school. I'd studied it in college. I almost had an accidental classics minor at William & Mary just because I took enough classes like that.
Yeah.
I hadn't really played with it in a while, but working in Shakespeare, you also sort of always have one foot in the classics as well, because Shakespeare had so much to do with the classics. And I got to thinking about it and I was like, that's good. That's a nice complex society. It's a very multicultural world. They have sanitation. That's cool. That makes it less icky to deal with certain aspects of the world. A lot ickier in some others. There's social things that not great in the ancient world. So I knew it would be complex and interesting. I hadn't fully settled on it until I think I was just scrolling through Tumblr or something. And this neoclassical painting by Lawrence Alma Tadema, which is the Baths of Caracalla. It's a beautiful painting of the Roman baths, and it gave me the Vitelii sisters. Latona and her two sisters are fully inspired by that painting. The women in that painting just had such clear personalities to me, and that's where they sprang up. And I was like, all right, there, I got it. I've got my characters. I've got my Roman world. I know there'll be all sorts of fun socio-political things I can play with, and it grew from there.
That's awesome. It's so fascinating to me to hear the sort of spark for authors' books. And like sometimes it's like you say, it's like I saw this painting and that was it. And then sometimes it's like all of these little pieces sort of coagulate.
Yeah.
And obviously, there are many, many parallels and similarities between the historical Rome and this fantastical city of Aven. And I was wondering, are there any like specific historical Roman people or events that inspired their counterparts in Aven? And how does that melding of the two world building aspects work for you?
I definitely think of it as an alternate version of our Rome. So if you look at the maps in the front of the book, it's our Europe, it's our Italy. Things are more or less in the same places. I played with some borders a little bit of the provinces, sort of thinking about how magic might influence the equation and when different territorial expansions and conquests and things like that happen. So it's tweaked a little bit. I sort of place my major point of divergence at the founding of the city, which is why it's called Aven and not Rome. The story that I came up with, instead of the brothers fighting and killing each other, they sort of share duties. And Romulus takes on the military aspects and more of the statesman aspects, and Remus is the priest and the mage. And he has a vision, and they end up settling on the Aventine Hill instead of the Palatine Hill. And so it changes the founding a little bit. So that's my major point of diversion. There are not any historical figures in the Ovid cycle that you would recognize. There's not a Julius Caesar. There's not those exact figures, but they definitely do influence the characters. Sempronius Terran began much more in the Julius Caesar mode. And then I realized I did not like him enough. Julius Caesar was kind of a major jerk in a lot of ways.
Did you love Rome more, Cass?
I did. I loved Rome more. I did. And so there are still, you will see still some aspects of Caesar in him, especially in his politics and the way he relates to the people. But I ended up pulling more inspiration from a reformer about, ooh, I'm going to get my dates wrong and someone's going to throw things at me on the internet. A few generations there, I'll fudge it. I won't give numbers. I'll say a few generations before Caesar. The Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, who were major reformers. And so a lot more of Tiberius Gracchus sort of got grafted in. He also has a little bit of Germanicus from the imperial era. Latona has a little bit of Agrippina Major, the nice one, not the crazy one. That was her daughter. I love Agrippina Major. I think she's a fantastic figure. So she gets pulled in a little bit. There are aspects of lots of real Roman figures that I've taken inspiration from or pulled some things into. My favorite thing I did, sort of directly pulling in Roman history, was at the end of From Unseen Fire. The very last line is Latona's, but it's words I stole from Julius Caesar. It's alia acta est. The die is cast, essentially, is what she says. I'm going to take Caesar's words, and I'm going to put them in the mouth of my female protagonist.
Yes.
That amused me.
Amazing. I love that. Yeah, now that you've said that, I was like, that's where that is from. Because a Latin school dropout, more or less. I took Latin through high school, and I remember some stuff, but not nearly enough to be an expert. Yeah, and so obviously you are so well versed in the history of it, which makes my heart sing because I am a history nerd through and through and through. So I would love for you to talk about your actual historical research process and what that's like and how it informs your writing. Do you do all of your research first and then you start writing, or does it sort of happen simultaneously? I would just love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, I had a partial classics background to begin with. And so I had that foundation to start from. I spent a while as I was beginning to think about it, and really actually more, I started the novel for a NaNoWriMo one year, National Novel Writing. So the first 50,000 words were sort of just every idea I could throw at the paper, whether I remembered my history correctly or not. And then over the next 6 months, as I finished it and revised, I did better research at that point. And I looked for books that were more specifically about the social history of Rome. Not so much who fought what battle when, because that wasn't going to be as useful to me. But how did they live? What were they eating? What was the pattern of their day like? What did they do in the morning? What did they do in the afternoon? There's a fantastic book, I think it's translated out of the Italian, by Alberto Angela, called A Day in the Life of Ancient Rome. And it just takes you through hour by hour what different classes of citizens would have been doing on a typical day in, I think he sets it in 117 or 118 in the imperial period, but it still gave me a decent enough idea of what the life would have been like. Mary Beard is also a fantastic scholar of ancient Rome. I love her books. I love her. So good. She has a great documentary series. It was on Amazon for a while called Meet the Romans. And she was very much that social history, looking at average people, what their lives were like, which I thought was just magnificent. So delving into lots of those books. I binged all of Mike Duncan's History of Rome podcast series, which was super fun. And yeah, things like that. Really looking and digging into the social history more than the political history, even though politics play a large role in the book, certainly. And then sort of once I had that grounded underneath me, then it became a process more of when I need a specific answer as I'm writing, I could go and find it. And usually go and find it more quickly because I knew where my sources were. I knew, sort of where to look for these things.
That's awesome. And I will also say, for those of you watching who are curious about this, Cass, you have a great like resource list on your website.
Thank you. I'm glad you noticed.
Because I went, I was like, I'm gonna get Cass's bio for this event, and then like 45 minutes later, I looked up and I was like, oh no, I am knee deep in some of these resources because they're so cool. And there's like timelines. I got super lost in the time calculator, like how long it would take you to get from Rome to Hispania.
Orbis.
Yeah, Orbis. That's what it was.
So cool.
Yeah,
that has been so valuable when I'm trying to figure out like how long it takes a legion to get from one place to the other and how much time has to pass back in Oven because I split the party, which is a dangerous thing to do in D&D or in writing. All of a sudden, you have many more moving pieces to keep track of. But it's called Orbis. It's from Stanford University, and it's gorgeous. You can pick basically 2 major cities in the Roman Empire and pick like the month, the kind of transportation, and it'll take you 3 weeks and 2 days to get from this place to this place. Thank you. Thank you, Stanford scholars.
And you know that like some ancient history professor was just like, guys, here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're gonna make.
Here's our project.
Yeah, which thank you to those grad students, whoever they are. Yeah, and so you mentioned about splitting the party in book 2 in Give Way Tonight. And I think as all good book 2s should be, I think Give Way Tonight, what I really loved about it was that it blows everything wide open. Like, you know, I think you get into the minds of more characters, and you explore we get to see different parts of the world, and the action really kind of ramps up onto the very last page. And without going into like too major spoiler territory, were there things in Give Way Tonight that had you planned this from the beginning, or were there things that surprised you, or even like fought you on the way in writing book 2 as opposed to writing book 1?
It's definitely a different experience, and some of it has to do with the very chaotic way I write to begin with.
Yeah.
When I did that first NaNoWriMo on what became From Unseen Fire, it included scenes because I am constitutionally incapable of writing in sequential order, just beginning to end. Cannot do it. And so it has that initial first draft had things that haven't yet appeared in the books. Maybe I'll get to them in book 3 or something, but don't know. And so some things for book 2 came out of those seeds and were things I'd written several years ago. And some of them were totally new, and I found in the process of writing and revising book 2. I knew that the Iberian plotline out in the province and the war with them was going to go a certain way. I think I had firmer ideas about the beats in that part of the story than I did back in Oven. And in fact, the first draft had a very different arc for Latona and Vibia and the female mages. It ended in a completely different place. It ended in a place that's, in fact, I think only a little over a third of the way into Give Way Tonight as it ended up.
Oh, wow.
I was taking too long to do nothing. And that's a thing you find out as you edit. You're like, the pacing is terrible. What is going on? And you find it and you fix it, hopefully. And I really like the change I made. We won't spoil the ending, but what I will say is that I was...
It is, Cass.
I'll say 2 things about it without spoiling it. One is that my second favorite movie of all time is The Empire Strikes Back. And the second is that I was genuinely not sure my editor was going to let me get away with that, but she did. And so it ends where it ends, in a much more exciting place. I think a lot more happened. I found a lot more interesting magical twists and turns to give to Latona and Vibia and their story in revision. I started having more ideas about, here's something else that could go terribly wrong. Let's put that in there. Let's make it worse. Let's make things much more difficult for them. The longer I thought about it.
What a shame if something were to happen to it. Oh man, that's delightful. And yes, I will say that.
More in edits. More of that was surprises.
Sorry, I think there's a delay on my end, so I'm just talking over you. I apologize.
Might be on my end. I don't know. I blip out for a second. So
we're making do. It's all good. But while I am figuring out where in the line we are, anyone who is watching, if you guys have a question as well, I'm just going to give you a reminder to put it down in the comments or to the side in the comments, depending on if you're on Facebook or YouTube. And I will bring it into the conversation. Let's see. Yes. So the magic also in these books. I really love the magic in your books because it is an elemental magic system, but what I love is that it sort of goes beyond the basic like earth, air, wind, fire, like the four physical elements, and has really been integrated into the politics and the religion and the society of Aven so well. And can you talk a little bit about the process of creating that magic system and then also the maintaining of that magic system in Give Way Tonight, and sort of the expansion that you do in book 2?
yeah, absolutely. The system came actually out of years and years and years of thaumaturgical discussions with friends. And this is a system that friends of mine back from high school, people I've known forever, that we've used in games and in writing and in other sorts of things we've done. And so when I was thinking, I'm writing a fantasy story, I want some magic. Well, I've thought a lot about these elements and how they might fit together and the balance of the tangible versus the intangible elements and all of that. And I realized, the Roman pantheon has a lot of elemental associations itself, and that's where the idea to make the gods sort of the patrons of magic came from. And it's something that's super fun for me because you end up with the major Olympian gods in most cases are the sort of chief governors of a different element. But because the Romans are the Romans and they have a god for literally everything. So, if you're a mage of water, your god might be Neptune, but it might be Metatrina, it might be Salus, it might be some, little minor deity that gave you this particular blessing and that's who you're devoted to. And it just grafted really well with the Romans' conception of religion and of magic, because to them, magic was a real force and a real thing. But also how they saw the gods as part of their lives. The Roman gods were very much a part of everyday life. It wasn't spirituality set apart in, I think, the way that a lot of, the modern Western world sort of views it. It wasn't something you only did on Sundays. It was every part of your day had some, kind of god associated to it. You woke up and you did a certain thing, and you went to the store and you might have, asked for help in your bargaining from Mercury or something like that. And so that sort of, it fit together really well for me that the gods would have this intimate association as well in the world I'd come up with.
Yeah. And sort of going into book 2, where we sort of get to know a little bit more of those different sides of the magic, and sort of you have to keep everything consistent. Was that a challenge in book 2, or was it sort of like you had the rules from the get-go, you were set?
No, that wasn't my difficulty. My difficulty is more not putting too much in, because I've thought so much about it for so long. I did really enjoy in book 2 opening up fracture magic in particular, which is, we see a little bit of it in book 1. It's Vibia's element, and we see a little bit of it in the final conflict in book 1, but it really hits high gear in Give Way Tonight. And you start seeing how different people interpret the element very differently. And so for Vibia, she sees her responsibility with fracture magic as control and keeping things from shattering. not all fracture mages think that way. Some of them want to see things break, and that becomes part of the plot line in book 2.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome. And also on Cass's website, there is a quiz to find out what your element would be. I will say I took the quiz and I got fracture as my element, so I was very excited.
It's an exciting element.
Yeah. Do you have an element that you connect to?
For me, it's spirit and fire because Latona has a lot of me in her.
Excellent. Amazing. We do have some questions from the audience.
Hi, everyone. I see lots of friends.
And some lovely comments. Nick Neagle says, yay, Cass.
Hi, Nick.
And Clever by Half Production says, Cass rocks and the Aven cycle rocks. Would agree. Sue Mosher says, congrats, Cass. Looking forward to getting to that level of her TBR stack. Same with other books, but like the TBR has levels. And Julia, hello, Julia, says, hi, Cass. I know you read tarot, and do you use it in your writing process?
That's a super great question. It sometimes depends on my mood. There are sometimes when I am feeling more attached to my tarot cards than others, and they're more a part of my daily routine. I don't tend usually to do a thing I know some authors do, which is sort of like draw a card and let that create the story for them. But I do a daily draw most mornings, and the days when I draw particular cards that are related to creativity, I feel like it gives me a little boost and a little inspiration to be like, yes, today will be a good day for writing. I've drawn the Page of Wands today. That's excellent. Good. I feel good about it. And so it gives me a little bump sometimes, and sometimes gets me just thinking consciously about creating, because that can be a hard part of being a writer is making yourself sit down and do the work sometimes if you just aren't feeling it, but you have to. Sort of meditating on the creative cards will sort of get me into the right headspace. And so I use it in that fashion more than as a sort of plot development sort of way.
Is there a deck that you particularly use?
I do. In fact, I think I can reach it.
I love seeing other people's tarot decks. It's so delightful to see.
My favorite is the Shadowscapes.
Ooh.
Oh, it's so pretty. It looks like it's probably making horrible noises. Sorry. Look at that on the back. The art,
oh wow.
Just gorgeous art. Just fantastically beautiful cards. Wow. So I've had this one for a lot of years now. They're cheeky. They're cheeky cards. They like to sass you, but
yes. Mine are also very sassy. They're like, I see the choices that you're making. Maybe make different choices. I'm like, really? Okay.
That's what you're thinking about?
Is that what you're thinking? Next question from Catherine Shellman. She says, congrats on book 2. And also, was there a character whose story or personality you ended up enjoying more than you expected before you started writing?
Yes. Vibia becomes a major figure in book 2. And I wasn't really expecting that when I started out. In the early versions and in early drafts and scenes I'd done, she was a much flatter character. She sort of existed just to be a barrier between Sempronius and Latona. And then I realized that was super boring. That was such a boring dynamic to put between these two female characters. It's just it's been done. It's a stereotypical rivalry. I ended up not liking that at all. And their personalities are so different. They're diametrically opposed people. I hear that from lots of people that they love Vibia, and I'm very happy for that. If you were to Myers-Briggs them, Latona's an ENFP and Vibia is an ISTJ. They are completely opposite personalities. And so a lot of what I knew I wanted to do in book 2, once I figured out that I liked Vivia better and wanted to do more interesting things with her, was putting them together and making them problem solve together and work together towards a common goal, which they approach from slightly different points. Latona wants to defeat the Discordians from a much more altruistic level. Latona likes and cares about people more. Vivia feels this repulsion at seeing fracture magic used badly. It is blasphemous to her, and so she is angry about it. And she's like, fine, I guess I will save the city, but I don't have to be happy about it.
I will save the city, but not for y'all.
From a principle standpoint. And it's like, that's so much fun too, because it's something she also doesn't understand about her brother. And you even see that in book 1, where Sempronius is like saying hi to everybody he meets. And she's like, oh my God, it's going to take us 6 hours to get down this street if you keep doing this.
I just want to go home. Sempronius.
And so she's so snarky, and she's so sharp and so clever. And that makes her a lot of fun to write, and bouncing her personality off of Latona's and also off of Aula and the others has been a lot of fun. I really enjoy writing her.
Yeah, and it looks like from the comments, both Catherine Shellman and Annie Murhead are loved hearing from Vivia. I also loved hearing from Vivia. Possibly why I got fracture magic in the quiz.
Could be.
And let's see here. Nick Neagle also has a question, and it actually was my next question. So well done, Nick. What Nick says, he hasn't read book 2 yet, saving it for the long weekend, but curious to know if it's the last in the series. If it is the last, are there other historical periods that you might focus on for future works?
I can answer that, and I saw he asked later down, if not the last, what might we expect from this world? It is not the last. I am contracted for a third, at least. If you super love it, tell Daw to buy more, to have me write more books. But I'm contracted for 3, so there will be one more. I'm working on it now. It's not as finished as I wanted it to be by the time book 2 came out, because 2020. I had big plans for it to be done in like August, and they did not manifest. But it's good. I'm definitely over 2/3 of the way done with drafting it, and then we'll see how much work Betsy thinks it needs. But that'll be good. There's so much exciting stuff in it. I'm having so much fun. I will say that the past week's upheavals have made it a little harder, because there are things that I had in my outline 3 years ago that all of a sudden shockingly similar things are happening in our real world, and no one's going to believe me that they were in my outline first. Riots in a major city. Well.
What? That's how I feel about the beginning bit of Coriolanus every time I see it. I'm just like, really?
Or Jack Cade. Like,
yeah, it's like, come on.
Shakespeare had it, man. He knew. We should not digress onto Shakespeare, although we should, because that's actually my other answer to the question. Whenever the Oven cycle finishes, or if I start another series, what idea I'm working with right now, and it's not drafted, it's not finished, my agent doesn't have it or anything. It may never manifest, but I've been playing around with the idea of using my Shakespearean background to create a new world and a different story. And this would be a second world, so it wouldn't be an alternate history. It would be a completely new invented place, mostly so that I can free myself of a lot of the gender constraints and other things that our world comes with, but to focus on the world of a early modern playhouse, like Shakespeare worked and wrote in. And the idea I've been playing with is the idea that communal experiences create magical power, and so a playhouse is a locus of generating magical power.
So here's the thing, Cass, is that now that you've put that into the world,
I know.
I wish
I'm gonna have to do it eventually. I got like
So
40K of a zero draft done, but we'll see. I'm working on it. I have, as I said, I did a zero draft, which is a totally messy, scrappy draft. Found some problems with the plot. Think I know how to fix them. Once I'm done drafting book 3 and it's off to my editor, I will return to that project. And while she's editing, I'll be working on something new.
You're speaking the words of my heart, Cass. I'm very excited about this potential future.
Don't get too excited yet, but
I will tamp it down. I will keep it in the back of my brain. I know how the business works, but that sounds super dope. Yeah, my next question was about your dream project. So that is a pretty great answer.
That's one, man, I have so many.
Yeah, I know, right? Let's see. I might ask that question at the end, like just as another little fun bonus question. But Annie has a question that is, what's your favorite piece of Roman culture or history that you've been able to incorporate into your work?
That's so hard because there's so much good stuff. I mean, I'm a dork for everything like the styles of wall paintings that they had at different eras, and thinking about how to work magic into that has been fun, and that's sort of in the background of my head. I think one of my favorite just sort of bits of Roman era trivia that I worked into book 2, and this isn't a major spoiler, so if you haven't gotten to it yet, don't worry about it, was I wrote in a tailgating scene. In my ancient Roman flavored book, there's a scene where there's races going on, but not everybody can fit in the stadium. So a bunch of guys are sort of hanging out outside, drinking and waiting to hear who won and talking about the races. It's a tailgating scene. It was really fun to write. It speaks to the very public nature of Roman life. Everything they did was out in the open. Many people barely had private homes to call their own. You might have a little cubicle that you shared with several other people. You lived life in the open, and I think that's fascinating. I also made references, and I think I've worked it into both books somewhere, about Roman fast food restaurants, which I think are just wonderful. They just totally finished unearthing one in Pompeii like a few weeks ago. If you saw it, it's beautiful. The paint is so well preserved, and it looks like you walked into a Subway. Like there's these dishes where there's big holes where the food was kept, and there's paintings of like, here are things you could order, and it's so modern. And I love the overlap between where the Roman world feels very modern to us, while at the same time it has so many concepts that are alien to us now. And it can be tempting to say like, oh, Romans, they were just like us, and they super weren't. But there are ways in which human's gonna human. And I like finding those points and playing them off each other.
Yeah, I just saw the article about the restaurant that they excavated in Pompeii, and someone had done like an image where it was like that headline where they like uncovered a restaurant in Pompeii, and the next two were like found graffiti insulting the owner of the restaurant. It was like, yeah, that checks out.
I would believe that. Yeah.
And that sort of leads into Catherine's next question, which is a follow-up to Annie's question, which is, what is the weirdest piece of Roman culture or history that you haven't yet figured out how to incorporate? I love these questions. These are also like what you've ended up typing into Google that made you think like, what am I doing?
The weirdest, or the Google most likely land me on some watch list was about what happens when you stab someone in the stomach? Like, what organs do you reach first? What does that look like? Like, that's concerning. I occasionally find myself like, these books get described as dark fantasy sometimes, and I get like, no, they're not dark. It's very hopeful. And then I realize, Morris, the thing you literally just Googled was about breaking finger bones and what would happen to like, that's not light and happy. That's not. Those people might have a point. Weird Roman history. Let's see. What's the weirdest thing? It's not super weird. The graffiti you mentioned, I keep meaning to work it in and haven't gotten there yet, but I definitely have a place for it in book 3 when the city tension starts ramping up, because Roman graffiti was wild. It was sort of their social media. Like, rather than tweeting, they would go out and write, Caesar's a big old jerk on the walls, whatever, and things like that. They would, one of my favorites was about a guy visiting a brothel and commenting upon the ladies he met there on the wall outside. It's like, that's another Yelp review, I guess. That's good for them.
3 stars.
Yes. So I mean, things like that, just little details of how they live their lives and the minutiae. I think burial clubs. I don't think I've talked about burial clubs yet. And this is
club, like a club, or a club like a wedding?
No, like a group, a group of people. Funerals are expensive, and they were back then too. And you couldn't be buried inside the city, and you wanted to have a proper monument so that the people and the gods would not forget you. But that was expensive. Getting a big old slab of marble or concrete or something and carving into it, that costs money. You can't pay anybody back. So many people, if they didn't have wealth themselves, they would enter sort of a burial club, and you paid a certain amount of dues. And then when you died, there was someone to raise your funeral stone and to look after it. Like, the club, looked after its members and would make sure they had proper offerings and the site was well tended and all of that. And it was often a function of a crossroads collegium, like we see on the Escalon College with Vatinius Obier and his set of people whom I love. But there were other types of burial clubs as well. But it was a way to make sure that your soul would be well tended if you were worried that you didn't have the money and or relatives to do that for you once you died.
That's really cool. I had never thought about that. Huh.
It says so much about how they thought about death and the afterlife. And it was Annie's right. I did do that. These people remember my books better than I did.
That's what
there was a it's when Vatinius Niso dies and Sempronius offers to pay, and Obier's like, no, we got a good club, we're good.
We're good, Sempronius, thanks.
We're good. You're a nice man, but we got it taken care of. Yeah, but like, that would be a totally normal conversation too. Like, offering to pay for a client's funeral was something a patron would do. That was totally normal. That was part of the contract between you. So
that's so, this is now like inspiring me to be like, go read all of those Roman history books that you have on your shelf. I'm like, okay, yeah.
I am sure there are things I'm forgetting about the legions. That one of the books on my rec list is Philip Matesiak's Legionary, which is a hysterically funny book because it's written as though it is a tongue-in-cheek guide to becoming a member of the Roman legions.
Amazing.
And it has great chapters entitled things like "The People You're Going to Kill." It's like, here's what to expect from the Dacians. Here's what to expect from those barbarian Englishmen out there.
That's delightful.
It's very funny. It has lots of like tiny details about how they live their lives, pulled from, in a lot of cases, their letters home or their funeral inscriptions, which is a great place to get information.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember somewhere on the internet I saw something about like all of the things from the legions that they find in the provinces, like in Britain and in Spain and all of those things. And it, like, the one that got me was they found Roman shoes in Bath or somewhere in England, and like they had been preserved in the cold, and it just blew my mind, like seeing these very well preserved Roman shoes was just like, I might have cried. It might have been a very emotional moment for me. Because as I said,
there are a couple of sites in England and in Germany, sort of the border fortresses that are being excavated, and lots of museums attached now, that I would love to visit. I so badly want to go to those sites.
Oh, like once all of this is good, it's a research trip. right?
Yeah.
That's what, yeah.
I justified a trip to Rome that way once, so absolutely.
Oh, amazing. My
Write that off.
fun little Roman trivia fact isn't really about the ancient Romans, but the Rome now. It's where Julius Caesar was assassinated is like a home to a colony of feral cats, and it's delightful.
Yep. I have a souvenir from there.
Amazing.
I went and said hi to the cats. They're amazing.
Oh, Sue Mosher says you should do a walking tour of Hadrian's Wall and do readings along the way. That's just brilliant.
Would be so much fun.
I know you can do a virtual Hadrian's Wall walk, but I had a friend who did it like in the spring. Yeah. You can like walk along Hadrian's Wall virtually. It's very cool. Great. So my last couple of questions. I know we talked about the Playhouse magical second world dream project. But my question was like, what is the absolute dream project that you have? Like no holds barred. Is there any IP that you would like to do? Like writing in someone else's universe, you know, world's wide open.
Absolutely. Yes. I would do just about anything to get to write for Star Wars. Which I feel like is a, you know, so many people say that, but Star Wars is what made me a writer. When I was 11, I saw A New Hope for the first time when it was re-released in theaters there in 1997 for the 20th anniversary. And I'd always been sort of a natural storyteller, but I'd never thought about it as something people did, you know? And I remember sitting there in the theater at the end of the movie as the credits rolled, just awestruck. Just my mind completely blown. And I realized that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make worlds like that. Like not even making movies, but I wanted to create worlds that were that big, that people could see themselves in and that went on, you know, like Star Wars, one of the great things about it is that it feels huge. And you can tell there are so many stories happening all over the place outside the main plot line that we follow. And I loved that. And that's been what I've wanted to do ever since. I wanted to make worlds like that. I've got a whole list of ideas. If Star Wars ever came to ask me, I've got all kinds of stuff. I'd love to bring the Tapani sector out of Legends and into reality. I've got ideas about Jedi. I've got ideas about Force users who are not Jedi, but also not Sith. I have a lot of thoughts about that.
Yes.
All kinds of ideas. I've got a whole list of them.
It's that thing where you just like roll the scroll.
Yeah, pretty much that. Like, here are things I would be interested in doing. Give me some Mad Cat Rebels. Give me a Coruscanti Society darling to play. I mean, I love it. It's such a big universe. I would love that. That'd be super fun.
You said earlier that Empire Strikes Back was your second favorite movie.
Yes, of all time.
What is the first one of all time?
Return of the King.
Okay, great, excellent, wonderful. I was like,
which bodes well if the end of Give Way to Night scares you. It is another fandom. That movie is it's just 4 hours of just gorgeous, phenomenal cinematography and amazing acting. And yeah, I love every minute of it. Even the extended version. Every minute.
Yes. Okay, we could talk about this forever. So my last question. And if anybody watching has any more questions, feel free to drop them in the box. But my last question for you is, and you don't have to have an answer for this, but I usually like to ask the authors that I interview if there's anything that I haven't asked you that you really wish people would ask you, or like that you really wanted to talk about but no one ever asks you, or but rarely come up in conversations, like that kind of a thing.
I don't know. You've done such a good job. You hit so many of the things that I love to talk about.
No pressure. I mean, sometimes it's like, yes, you ask me everything except about my main character.
No.
Susie, who like is the most important part of the book. Like, so
I mean, you could pick literally any character, and I could just go off about them because I love them all. I love all of my children except Herennius. He can fall off a cliff.
I love all of my children equally. Earlier, I don't care for Herennius.
I don't care for Herennius.
I don't care for Herennius.
It's absolutely accurate. You're not supposed to.
Then you've done your job very well, I think.
My villains, Ikialdi and Bela, are at least interesting, and
Yeah.
Lucretius is a jerk, but he's like, he at least passionately believes what he believes, and that's interesting. Herennius is just a
like, hey guys, what you talking about?
Point.
See the lepidus of this triumvirate? Like
a little bit, yeah. Of my villain triumvirate, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that guy.
That guy. Oh, he's still here? Like, what? Awesome. Well, great. I think it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Type really fast if you are before I wrap it up. But thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, Cass, for joining us tonight. It's been such a joy to talk about these books. And I am so excited to see where book 3 goes. And I'm so excited for all of y'all to get to read this. I will bring it here closer to the front. But yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, yes.
This has been so much fun. I love it. This is great. And good to see you.
I try very hard to make it fun for people. But here we go. We have book 1 and book 2 of the Avon Cycle from Unseen Fire, Give Way Tonight by Cass Morris. You can find her on her social media, on her website, which I believe are all in the event listing. If they're not, we will tag you on Twitter and all of that good stuff.
I am very online. I'm almost always on Twitter.
Yeah.
Almost 24 hours a day available on Twitter. So
yeah, so we are happy to talk more on social media about the Avon Cycle or Star Wars or Return of the King or any of the aforementioned topics. But thank you all so much again for listening or for watching in tonight. And I hope you all have a wonderful week. Fingers crossed that everything feels we're going to end on
everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.